Good evening.
Oh, hello, hello.
Good evening, Tom. It's like we're at different parts of London this evening. Welcome everybody to August's edition of Boom Time. Sadly, due to COVID afflictions, we are back in Zoom world, but nonetheless, we still have a fantastic guest this evening, as ever, as you will know. And before we start, Tom, we've got to do the honours, just do a little intro to you and, of course, what we're going to be talking about this evening. But I am your host, Scott Morrison, founder of The Boom, and I help businesses unlock, and unleash commercial, creative and cultural impact in people, teams and businesses. And as you know, every month we are incredibly passionate about impact and how to create impact, because in this crazy world that we've just been through in the last 18 months, the thing that I've really been rallying for and sharing with you all is the power of the opportunity right now to create the future that you want to see. So each month we speak to fantastic people I think are shaping the future, and Tom is absolutely one of those people. Today we're going to be talking about the future of resilience and drawing on some fantastic experience from Tom. And let me tell you about Tom. So Tom is part of the Tempest Two. They are professional adventurers with a difference. In 2015, James Whittle and Tom jumped into a rowing boat and voyaged 3,000 miles across the Atlantic. And since then, they have been full-time adventure athletes who take on challenges with no experience at all, really, to call upon. They're not elite, ex-military, or Olympians. They are just two ordinary, I'd say extraordinary, frankly, friends that have built a growth mindset that has allowed them to take on some of the biggest adventures on the planet and achieve things many believe to be impossible. And so right now, as we draw to the end of summer, and actually a lot of people are going back into their offices, in their workplaces, we thought it'd be a fantastic opportunity to really think about resilience and how to build, grow, nurture, and find, in some cases, resilience. So Tom, welcome to Boom Time for August. Lovely to see you.
What a wonderful intro. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. A shame it's not in person, but it is what it is, and we're all used to this now. But no, great to be here.
Absolutely, and what we're all about is creating some fantastic content for our viewers and people. So welcome people at home this evening. If you want to ask any questions, please do use the Q&A part, or indeed the chat, and we will come to some of your questions as we go through the interview this evening. So Tom, I wanted to start actually with part of our intro, which I just think is frankly incredible, which is you jumped into a rowing boat and you voyaged 3,000 miles across the Atlantic. So let's start there. Well, actually a little bit further back maybe. How did you and James meet, and how did that conversation come about?
So James and I met, must be about 12 years ago now. We both worked in the student team at Red Bull UK. So we were both working at Red Bull, became friends, then went our separate ways in our career. I kind of went agency side. James started working for a couple of brands. And essentially we reconvened through a drunken text message. I was at the Dickens Inn in St. Catherine's Dock in East London. And the reason I was there was I was at an event called the Clipper World Yacht Race that some people may have heard of, but it's basically a circumnavigational yacht race around the world. And the reason I was watching that was my mum had taken part, and she had raced one of these big yachts from London to Rio. And she was at the culmination event where these boats were coming back from, some people have been at sea for a year. And, you know, she was there with her team, and there were tears and emotion and pride. And I was literally stood at the bar kind of on my own, just like, oh Christ, my mum is officially cooler than I am. And I'd had a couple of beers and I Googled like biggest adventures in the world, and somewhere on page 3 after Everest and the Amazon and the poles, this ocean rowing popped up. And, you know, I thought if my mum sailed it, I need to now go and row it. And I text James, first person I text, he was at a birthday party. So he was kind of on his way as well. And, you know, it's 4 or 5 texts. He was like, yeah, let's do it. And that's kind of where the idea was born from. No romantic backstory of adventure or on the oceans or anything. We had no idea even how to row. We'd never rowed, we'd never sailed. We had literally no experience. And we then told everyone around us that we were now legendary adventurers. And that was the start of our journey, really.
So what do you do? You just do you walk down to the boat shop and walk in and say, right, we want an Atlantic going rowboat? How do you do all that?
That's literally it. We basically woke up the next morning and realized, because we told everyone, we now had like an obligation to go and do it. And the first thing we did was to find a local ocean rowing club, and the closest one was in South Wales. So we went down there, and we managed to get on a boat with 5 70-year-old Welsh women who spent 2 hours just tearing us to pieces. And then, you just start learning, like when you're learning about any new industry or any new trend, you just start speaking to people. And we found a boat builder. There's only 2. We found one, and then we just kind of grew into it from there. And every kind of stone you overturn, there's more problems and more boundaries and that you need to get over. And that was really it for 18 months until we got to the start line.
There's something in what you said, and also again in the intro that again I think people will recognize right now, and this idea of there's no experience to draw upon, right? And I think about what's happening in the world right now, the changes that we're seeing in our lives, in work, and how we socialize, everything else. There's no experience to draw upon from that, frankly. We're all trying to learn things, but like the world, we're understanding that there are gaps in our understanding and our knowledge in all of this. What gaps what gaps in your understanding and knowledge became apparent when you're undertaking the Atlantic Challenge? And I'm thinking more about from a mindset point of view, not actually physically as well. What were the things that suddenly came to like light as you went through this?
I think with the row, that the biggest challenge actually initially was, we decided we wanted to do it. We kind of spoke to relevant people and whatnot, and then we realized how much it cost basically to do it. And it's just shy of kind of 70,000-80,000 pounds just to get to the start line, because you've got a boat, and these aren't just kind of off the shelf. You've got to then have all this safety equipment, and you have to do safety training, and then the logistics, getting it back. So it all really racks up. So it was a big cost. And, I think every time we kind of learned a bit more, we realized we maybe didn't know about this. We'd find out we had to have this qualification. But really, we went into it with this kind of complete naivety, which actually was a bit of a blessing in disguise, because I think if you overthink something like an Atlantic row and you think about the dangers and stuff like that, you start to talk yourself out of it. And I think, for us, that naivety was a complete blessing. To be honest, physically, we thought we had to get big and strong and put on loads of weight. And, to be honest, that was rubbish. I think the Atlantic row is a really good example of what the internet essentially is at the moment, where there are loads of people telling you conflicting things. Most of it's rubbish. And you kind of need to figure out your own way. And, we were told, you're both going to hate each other. You need to row naked, all these things that we were suddenly doing. And it was like, why are we doing this? Yeah, there's only 700 people have done this in history, and we're taking their word as Bible. And, I think when we understood that, there wasn't a huge amount out there to learn from, really, because it's such a small group of people who've ever done it, that you kind of just got to find your own way. And that's what we did. And we certainly made that row our own, for sure.
And it's actually led you to take on a whole series of other challenges, right? What else have you done, and what have they taught you that you've taken forward, again, from a resilience kind of perspective? What have they taught you?
So I think, we landed in Barbados after we'd spent 2 months at sea, like completely alone. We'd gone through hurricanes and capsizes and near misses with tankers. And we arrived in Barbados with this real kind of, we had the beards and the tans, but we'd realized actually what we were capable of. And I think also when we touched land, our perception of risk had completely changed. And I think, risk for most people when they think about leaving a job is too great. And I think because of what we'd gone through, suddenly leaving our jobs to go and take on this life of adventure wasn't a risk for us anymore. It's like, really, what's the worst thing that could happen? And so we came back to London, both had, great jobs that we loved, but we handed in our notice, and they were like, great, what are you going to do? And honestly, we had no idea. We wrote our business plan in the middle of a hurricane, the worst business plan of all time, like guaranteed. It was so bad. And, we had no savings. We had nothing kind of prepared. We'd left our jobs. And really, over the last 5 years, what the Tempest Two has become is, as you said in the intro, James and I are professional adventurers, but in the least traditional sense. And our whole purpose is to show that ordinary people like us, with the right mindset and the right kind of strategies and behavioral skills, can achieve amazing things. And, since the row, we've ridden motorbikes from London to Sahara, like the day after passing our test. We've done an ultra triathlon through Patagonia, 1600k bike into a world record 70k ultra into a world first 100k paddleboard. And then recently we climbed El Capitan in Yosemite, which is the rock really that Alex Honnold made famous when he climbed it without ropes. Right. And we climbed it.
You did it with ropes, presumably.
I think we set a record with the most ropes ever taken up El Cap. So the opposite. But we'd never climbed 18 months prior, and our recipe is we just take on these big challenges that people tell us we can't do. We surround ourselves to the best people, like Alex Honnold, for example. We're really fortunate to train with Alex, and he kind of climbed with us a bit, and then we go and prove those people wrong, and then we tell the story to hopefully inspire other people who said, if those two guys can do that, why can't I do this? That's really our whole mission.
That leads me on to my next question, really, which is, there's a little bit of the answer in there, but it is like, people say, why? Like, what drives your desire to do this? And of course, from what you just said there, it feels like there's some, kind of some deep passion that you have about showing the world that anyone can do these kind of things. But have you thought more deeply about what's driven that desire to do this great stuff?
It's changed. So the desire to do the first one, the row, was definitely, there was some ego in that. I think it was when we initially told people about the row, we were literally laughed at. You've got no right doing that. You're absolutely joking. Even when speaking about the fundraising, like, you're never going to raise that money. And it became a bit of a mission to prove those people wrong, really. And we did that. And then it's now changed from our own ego to, when we speak at companies or we get messages on Instagram saying, I watched this piece of content, or I followed you when you did this. Because of that, I've now done this, or I've signed up for a marathon, or I've left my job or started a business, whatever it is. That for us, it's an amazing feeling to know that something you've done has inspired someone else to go and, hopefully do something great as well. And that's now kind of become our why. And that's kind of what we've been trying to do for the last 5 years, bit by bit.
Brilliant. And then I guess the other question I've got is how? Because I really want us to there are people out there who will hear this and see this and hear our conversations who will be massively inspired by you, but like you say, will be worried about, I've got a mortgage, or I've got a job, or I can't do this, I'm too scared. And what I really love about, again, what you talk about is the growth mindset. So Carol Dweck's work on, fixed and growth mindset. Fixed mindset being, I'm just going to accept what it is and I can't grow anymore. Growth mindset, we can really learn and grow and develop and push ourselves. And that's a key driver in fulfilling your challenges. And also, of course, with that comes resilience. So how would you define resilience? What does it mean? And what part did the growth mindset and resilience play for you in all of this?
Yeah, I think, both resilience and growth mindset, especially in the last year that we've had, have become these big trend words, in business and teams and whatnot. And I think resilience especially, I think often gets a little bit misconstrued into people thinking that you're either born resilient or you're not. And I think that's when people start to think that resilience means that you have grit or mental toughness, and being resilient is just being able to, just hit your head against the wall and just keep going and keep going and keep going and put yourself in a really dark place. That isn't resilience to me. That's kind of, that's mental strength, that's grit, that's toughness. Resilience for me as a definition is someone who is able to turn a massive obstacle into an opportunity. And I think what COVID has done, the first time in history, is almost like a global population level kind of experiment on how resilient people really are. And you look at businesses, and us, perfect example, everyone was affected in some negative way, for sure. Some businesses, they pivoted immediately, and you've got cafes that are now tripled their turnover because they do deliveries, and you have businesses that were focused on this and now completely different because of COVID. And I think it's having that, I guess, complete open-mindedness to say, right, we're going to go into this obstacle, but we're going to come out better off. And it's going to be tough. There's going to be really low points, but we will come out better off than we went in. And that for me is someone who has resilience, and you can develop that. You can learn resilience. And I think a lot of people think you're either born with it or you're not. Also, I think a lot of people think that by reading a book, you're going to become resilient. That's not possible. Resilience is the outcome of 5 or 6 behavioral skills underneath it. And once you work with them, then you become resilient, and then you can never complete it. And that's why it's so alluring, I think, but it's been thrown around a lot, a 2-hour workshop on resilience is going to now make my team totally resilient. It's not how it works. You can never complete it. It's finite.
It's interesting as well, isn't it? How just what you're talking about there. I bet there's some people out there thinking, oh, I don't think I've got any resilience, so I'm not very resilient. And then actually when they think back to what's happened over COVID and look at what they've done and how they've, some people pivoted their business, some people have changed their whole lifestyle, but the fact that they've made it through the last 18 months is a real signal of their resilience that they might not have recognized. And I wonder how we can help people recognize, is there anything you think that people could look at themselves and recognize their own resilience?
I think it's just reflecting back on the last 12 months. I don't think people do that enough. We've all gone through this essentially this hurricane. It's a really nice personification. When we went through a hurricane on the Atlantic, it was completely unplanned. We had no control over it. It hit us. We went backwards 100 miles. Everything got, just thrown to the wind. And it's exactly what happened with COVID. Everyone's going along well, they've got big plans, and then bang, everything stops. And I think people need to look back at the last 12 months and be proud that, if you've got 2 kids that you've been homeschooling whilst working 9 to 5, or, amazing achievements, really, that, they don't get written up in the papers about businesses and whatnot. But what you've done over the last 12 months, everyone really, you should look back on and be like, actually, I've learned how to do that, or my children have learned that because of me. And now because of COVID, I speak to my parents more because of Zoom, and all these things that you don't really take the time to actually understand. But I think it's really worth just spending 10 minutes over a coffee and being like, actually, think about all the stuff you've actually achieved in the last 12 months that really wouldn't have been there without that.
Brilliant. So let's keep that theme of thinking about resilience, and I want us to think about unblocking, unlocking, unleashing that, and your learnings and what you're seeing in business and how people can go about doing it. So we always ask the same question for everybody in every boom time. And the first question is always about unblocking. And it's about unblocking what success looks like, actually. And what success would look like for you. And I ask the same question, like, if you were to wake up tomorrow morning and everything was exactly how you wanted it to be for your life, your business, what would that look like?
Do you know what? I'm not sure I have like a definitive answer to that, because I honestly don't really know. And I think about this quite a lot, and I think, success is such a subjective thing, isn't it? For a lot of people, it's getting a pay rise or having the money to do this or have a house or car. And I think that used to be the case for me, and that there definitely is still some kind of, financial kind of element to success for me. But it's more about, success for me is waking up tomorrow morning and being able to do whatever I want to do with, money isn't a problem. It's not having 10 million in the bank, but it's being able to, I want to go and do that. I can do it. And I don't think I have, I don't want to wake up and be like, the business is at this size. I've hired this many people. I've got this many followers. That for me, I don't have that picture. What I do have is what I don't want. And I know very much what the antithesis of success is for me. And that is to wake up and I can't be asked to get out of bed. I still have days like that, but you know what I mean, consistently, and not to have drive for the day, the week, the month ahead. That for me, if that ever happens, I know that I need to make a change, and I will do. So, I don't have this utopian vision of what my perfect life is tomorrow, but I do have a very good understanding of what I don't want it to be. And it all kind of centers around drive and working towards something, really.
I love that. Great. People often say like great strategy is it's as much about what you don't do, what you don't want, as it is what you do want. And it's a really nice way of looking at it. Like, I don't want to wake up. I'm the same as you in many respects. I started my business, and then through COVID, did a huge kind of pivot and shifted everything pretty much virtually and digitally, and created a load of new stuff. And all of that is in the back of my mind is exactly similar thoughts to you, which is I don't ever want to wake up, and be like, oh, why am I doing this? What am I doing? I've spent time in my career doing that, frankly.
Yeah.
And, but again, that's down to a sense of, again, resilience. I found myself feeling like I didn't know how I was going to get through COVID at first. So you do have to draw on the resilience, and it is always quite surprising how much you can draw upon, like when you're going through a hurricane, frankly, which is, and actually I was doing some reading today for BCG, and they were saying that they'd spoken to 1,200 businesses. And they were talking about this idea of resilience transformation and how the impact it's had on business bottom lines. They said that there's two key advantages. Firstly, it drives growth. Clearly, we'd expect that to be, if you can get your team to get a sense of resilience, it will drive growth. But actually what was quite interesting is they were saying that if you want to build it as an organization, as a group, it needs to be as close to the crisis point as possible to have the most impact. And so it made me sort of think, the work that you're doing with the Tempest Two, and you're looking at both from a personal resilience point of view for individuals and also in businesses. How are you seeing businesses you work with addressing resilience and the impact it's having on their business when they do it well and when they don't do it well?
Yeah, I think there's two camps. I think everyone's talking about it, and some are just talking about it, and some are actually, putting it into practice. And I think it comes down to the way a business can build a resilient workforce. It really comes down to allowing that workforce to take risks, to fail more often and learn from those failures, because that's how you build resilience. It's an unresilient business is one that just plateaus and it's comfortable and it doesn't take risks, it doesn't innovate in any way. Whereas a resilient business learns from 1,000 failures, and because of those failures, they innovate and they essentially grow, and that's down to their people. So it really is. To make people resilient, is a company has to kind of give them the reins and give them the autonomy to say, do you know what, make these risks and fail once, don't fail 2-3 times on the same thing. That's just stupid. But fail once, learn from it, and then progress from there. But then you have the other ones who, oh yeah, we're building this resilient workforce because we've bought them all a LinkedIn learning course on resilience. And it's like, right, okay, yeah, that's not how it works. But that for them is they've ticked the box. Businesses always fall into those two camps. It's the one who really understand how they do it, and the ones that try and just tick the box and they say they do it.
What were your blockers to building resilience? And I mean, as we say, resilience is not just a kind of a one thing fix, it's a constant thing. So we're always coming up against blockers. But what comes up for you occasionally when you're trying to build your own resilience, and how do you overcome that?
I think the biggest blocker to resilience is just comfort. It's being, okay, things are going quite well. I'm comfortable. Let's not rock the boat. And do you know what was funny? Before COVID hit, so James and I, we make money with the Tempest Two anyway. We make money through doing these adventures. We get brand sponsorship that pay for it, and then we speak at companies and run workshops and employee development type of thing with the Tempest Two. And when COVID hit, suddenly we had, for the first time in 5 years, we had pipeline. We'd worked so hard, but as you all know, that kind of work is like, it's like buses. You'll get 3 in like 1 month and then none for 6 months. And there's no way of generating pipeline. There really isn't. And we finally had like a full year, and it was like, right, perfect. And because of that, we were coasting. We weren't actually working that hard, And then COVID hit, and we sat down, and it was like, I wonder if this is going to affect us. Is it going to come over here? I don't know. And then one client dropped out, and it was like, okay. Then another dropped out, and then within about 72 hours, a year's worth of work just fell from beneath us.
Yeah.
And because of that, we completely had to go back to the drawing board. Right, how are we going to make money? How are we going to pay rent next month? And as soon as we did that, we've come out of COVID with a completely new business, which I think we'll get onto later. But if we hadn't had that moment of uncomfortableness, none of that would have happened. I'd be sat here, we would have had a great financial year last year, but we wouldn't really have gained anything other than just a bit more revenue, really.
Yeah, and that the interesting thing about COVID has been, we had Rankin on a few months ago, and Rankin shared the same story. I share the same story as you. The same thing happened to me. That first week when they announced lockdown, the phone didn't stop ringing. None of it for good reason.
Yes.
and Rankin said exactly the same on the show. He said, his phone, he really feared for his business. This is somebody who is a world famous, well-established media owner, director, photographer. It hit everybody, right? And again, we talked earlier about the kind of fixed and growth mindset, and the growth mindset allows you to expand out and think differently and go, yeah, I can grow and learn and change all this. But let's focus on the fixed mindset, because again, I'm sort of encouraging people that this idea, there's business as usual, which is what some people are focusing on, but then there's business unusual, which I call like the growth mindset thinking. And this blocker of business as usual, this fixed mindset, what are are you seeing businesses? I'm seeing some businesses kind of retreat into this fixed mindset phase, and I'm sort of thinking, are you seeing a similar thing? And what advice have you got for businesses that are feeling like we've got to retrench, we've got to we're just in a fixed mindset? How do we unblock that and help them get out of it?
I think having a fixed mindset as either an individual or a business, it's almost like having the handbrake on. You're massively restricting the pace you can operate, and where you want to get to is going to take twice as long. And you're really, you are really just slowing things down. And I think people retreat to a fixed mindset because it feels safe and rational. Whereas, I think like all great investors, like Warren Buffett, it always says, he invests big when others are retreating. And it's the same kind of thing. When there's turmoil and there's craziness and there's change, you want to be going with that, because amazing things happen when there's chaos. Things innovate and the whole landscape of business changes. So to just stick to what you know in that period is probably the worst thing you can do. And I think as an individual, especially young people, I think everything we know about the future of work, everything we know from the McKinsey and Deloitte reports about what the career of a Gen Z individual is going to be, if you've got a fixed mindset at that age, you're in for a massive shock, because the career ladder's gone. Their careers are going to be transient. It's going to be this almost entrepreneurial freelance kind of economy where, people will swap roles and industries and careers, in a year, 2 years. And to operate in that kind of working environment, you have to have a growth mindset, because you need to understand, right, I've done this for a year. I'm going to go and work in a completely different industry, but I need to have the confidence in myself that I can go and learn that in the first couple of months of being on the job. And as soon as you start operating like that, as soon as you do it once, I'm pretty convinced you then have it for life, because it's almost like getting your foot through the door, and that's the hardest bit. And I think it's so important for people to really understand that just being good at one thing and just being, I'm just going to do this. They say that hard skills are becoming redundant within 3 years now, because you need to upskill them because of technology and just how quickly things are moving. And if you don't have the mindset that allows you to adapt with that pace, you're just going to be left behind, and which is fine. You'll survive, but you're never going to thrive.
Yeah, I often say we had squiggly careers on last.
Yes,
so
Helen and Sarah.
Helen and Sarah on. Yeah, they're fantastic. They're echoing exactly what you're saying there. The idea of climbing up the corporate ladder is going to be such an anachronistic view of the world. Well, it is already in some senses, but in the next few years, and I think it's definitely been accelerated by COVID. The amount of people who are saying, well, my career needs to look like this now, and if I can't get what I need in this company, I'm going to move to this company over here. And I think that when I look at the world and I look at what's happening, I think about, well, what are we trying to unlock? How can we help people unlock that sense, again, sense of resilience, but a sense of a growth mindset, a sense of change? But who's doing it well, do you think? Which companies or individuals, who inspires you with their thinking on resilience, and who's shaping the future of it from your perspective?
I think, there are lots of companies and startups who, there's a company called Unmind that comes to mind, who are kind of an employee well-being platform, and they do a fair bit on resilience. And I love what they're doing. I think individually, one of our advisors for our new business is Dr. Grace Lorden, and she's a professor of behavioral science at LSE.
Wow.
And she wrote a book called Think Big recently, which is a really good read. It's all about resilience and kind of mindset in the workplace. And I think some of the stuff that she's putting out there is really valuable, because it's, you know, it's also rooted in academia and science. And I think, you know, you need to really understand resilience. You need to understand, you know, what are the actual physiological changes and what's going on with your brain and everything, as well as kind of the everyday stuff. And I think
absolutely
another person is someone we're working with at the moment, who's called Hazel Finley. She's probably the best big wall rock climber in the world, a female big wall rock climber in the world. But she's also studying neuroscience around kind of mindset, and she goes into flow state. And she was telling us about, you know, how she prepares herself for really hard, really dangerous climbs. And just hearing her and learning through her stories is something that I found massively inspiring and really kind of relatable. She bridges that gap really well between elite level sport and what it means for someone on the street. So those two people, they spring out for sure.
Brilliant. And then we like to give people sort of a sense of hearing from experts like you, how they can, you know, again, change their lives. But if you had a couple of pieces of advice you could give to people to help them unlock resilience in themselves or their business, what would you offer up for our listeners and viewers today?
I would say become a master at reframing. And what I mean by that is, you know, you can work on reframing by, you know, when something bad happens, and I think Londoners are probably the worst of it. And we've all been, you know, you miss a train and it's the end, you know, it ruins your day.
Catastrophize everything.
Yeah, there's one 30 seconds away, but you're fuming. And, you know, we don't have an umbrella and it rains, you're fuming. And I do that all the time, and I still do, to be fair. But, you know, it's reframing negative situations and being like, right, this has happened. At the moment, it feels like the end of the world. But, you know, most of the time with bad stuff, you look back 6 months later and you're like, why was I so worked up about that? And the other thing outside of reframing is to develop a very short memory and forget about stuff. Become a goldfish. I can't remember what I was watching the other day, but it was around the same thing. Become a goldfish. Just if something bad happens, bad day, bad week, bad meeting, forget about it. Reframe, forget about it, and move on. Because, you know, if you carry that baggage around, and so many people do this, you know, you can see it on them. It's almost like it's weighing them down. They've had, you know, a bad week or a bad month or something. They didn't get that job a year ago, and they're still so fuming about it. And, you know, every wedding you go to, there's that one person, oh yeah, you know, I didn't get that job. It's like, when was that? It's like 3 years ago. It's like, and you're still going on about it. Like, just forget stuff and move on, because life's too short to worry about that kind of crap.
I love it. One thing that I think they're great bits. I love the concept of reframing. I talk a lot about it in leadership. You know, reframing puzzles and reframing solutions and all sorts of different things. One thing I certainly found useful, and I have over the last sort of 12 to 18 months with lockdown, has been the idea of surrendering. So I've been reading a lot of books on the power of surrendering. And I found that really useful, that, you know, when, like you say, when bad things happen or when stuff happens or things don't go quite how you want them to do, is just to kind of let it go rather than fight against it and use all your energy and everything else to try and, I want to control this. It's like, go, no, hang on a minute. I'm just going to let this play out, because in some way, you know, you can get a sense of there's something better coming, or this is meant to happen because there's going to be a significant change here. And that has really helped build my resilience personally, because actually in many cases, something better or different has happened as a result of letting go of that kind of stuff that I would have naturally tried to hold on to and control. So I think that they're really powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. About. Controlling the controllables is a massive one. And it goes with that baggage. It's, you know, if it's an extraneous variable that you can't impact, don't worry about it. Which is hard to do, to be fair, but once you kind of build that understanding that you can't control anything outside of your sphere of influence, then it massively helps with general well-being, for sure.
That's a great tool as well, that kind of sphere of influence. The stuff that's, you know, the stuff that you can control, the stuff you can't, just let it go and recognize it's way outside of. Do you use any other tools or resilience building mind things that we could share with people tonight that help focus on resilience?
I think not really, like, specifically. I think, I could sit here and say I get up every day and I meditate for 30 minutes and I have an ice bath, and then I do like a lot of people say they do. And if they do that, bloody hell, fair play.
Good luck to them. Where do they do?
Yeah.
When do they do anything else?
Yeah, I know, but fair play. I think for me, a big part of it is finding your own meditation, and whether that's exercise, whether that's walking your dog, whether it is the last 30 seconds of a shower. Like, I'll blast it cold. I'm not brave enough to do a full 5 minutes like some people do, but I'll blast it cold just to give myself a wake up. And I think that just having a cold shower doesn't make you resilient, but what it does is it starts to build habits. But I think the biggest tool that I can say that I do use a lot, to be fair, and with Tempest Two and whatnot, is setting a really big, tough goal. And that for me is the ultimate tool to build resilience, because if you have a big goal that is going to be tough, and the steps and every day to get there is going to be tough, that's how you build resilience. And it's having that in your locker to say, right, in 6 months I want to do this, in a year I want to do that, in 2 weeks I want this to happen, and to work really hard to do it. That's how you start understanding how to overcome barriers and things like that.
Brilliant. You're a man of action, Tom. I'll absolutely say that wholeheartedly. And
sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I wake up, I'm like, no action today. I think Instagram tells one story, but I'm not an action man, that's for sure.
But I mean, I guess in the sense of making things happen, like, in the third part of the operating system for the Boom is about unleashing. Right? It's all well and good to have, it's all well and good to unblock things, and then it's all well and good to sort of join the dots with great inspiration and great ideas, but it's another thing to actually unleash them. That's the kind of most important part of making everything happen. And like you said, during COVID, you and James came up with a new concept and a new, and again, based around the idea that the way that people's careers are going to be is going to be very, very different. And we need to build a new set of thinking. We need to build resilience into it. And you're calling that Dose. And I'd love to hear more about how that came about and what Dose is going to be able to do.
Yeah, so Dose, actually, the concept of Dose started a few years ago now. And as I said earlier, James and I, as the Tempest Two, we speak all around the world at all the classic companies you'd imagine would book us to speak, and we deliver our keynote, and then more often than not we'd get called up to can you come in and deliver a workshop on that part of the keynote, whether it's communication under pressure or growth mindset, whatever it may be. And that became a really big part of our business. And suddenly we were like, hang on, the Tempest Two is getting a bit grey here. Like, are we an adventure brand, or are we a workplace brand? What are we? So we initially set up Dose as a bit of an experiment on the side of the Tempest Two. And it was a behavioral skills training company. So James and I, we'd go into organizations and we'd work with their employees to try and embed this mindset, this growth mindset, this adventure mindset, getting them to develop these behavioral skills. And quickly, as a two-man team, we were running, massive projects for Airbnb, in all their markets, for Bank of New York, to Heineken, Bacardi, huge brands. And being completely upfront, they were paying really big money for this. But we realized, we were working with 0.5% of that company. It was either a grad scheme or a senior leaders, or it was a C-level suite. And, we suddenly realized it was like, we were pretty comfortable doing it, as we said earlier. Everything was going fine. But it's like, this kind of access to this kind of behavioral skill development should really be open to everyone, rather than just, the 1% of the 1% companies in the world. And when COVID hit, we're like, right, this is now our opportunity to do what we'd always wanted to do and make Dose scalable. So we flipped Dose into essentially an ed tech startup. We raised a little bit of money. Pretty early on, we built a product that we thought was great. We tested it, it was crap, completely wrong idea. We came back to the drawing board and we redid it again. We've done this like 3 times, and we're now launching into the market next month. And what Dose is, we're basically building a brand around professional development for the future of work. And we're launching a platform into the market that is going to give specifically Gen Z behavioral skill development to allow them to have extraordinary careers. And the way we do that is through taking amazing, inspiring people like Masterclass have, Gordon Ramsay and Tony Hawk and all these amazing celebrities. We have Hazel Finley, like I mentioned earlier, we have Michelin star chefs, we have neuroscientists, we have musicians telling their story, and then we turn it into a dose. And a dose is a 10-minute, highly accelerated, almost workshop style format on the platform. And our goal really is to try and embed these skills into young people and then pair them with the best employers in the world. And all these companies for years have been saying, we want to hire on behavioral skills. Behavioral skills are really important for us. Yet they all hire through LinkedIn, on a CV, on a page. That's it. That's how they hire. It doesn't matter what they say, they do, because it's the only thing out there, really. So we want to be kind of an end-to-end kind of solution where we are building the best talent pool in the world, giving people these incredible skills that they, and the way they learn it is really enjoyable, and then matching them with amazing companies. And we're super excited about it. And that started when we pushed off land to the Atlantic. This journey we've been on has kind of now brought us to this point. This is kind of our next adventure, really, because even getting to now running a startup before we even have any customers, there's been, Christ, you talk about resilience, like, is a huge test of it for sure.
Absolutely. And when have you got a date for the dose launch next month?
So we're going to launch a kind of a beta version to probably a group of 100 to start with at the very end of September. If you want to be involved in that, head to our website, which is www.dose.work. And then we'll kind of start scaling it up. But we're going to consumers. We also give it to teams who want to upskill their people on the key behavioral skills. So it's going to be a phased launch, but we're super excited about it.
Fantastic. We'll make sure that all those details you've given there, Tom, go on our boom sheet for this show, so people can get involved. That's brilliant. Great. Dose, look out for that. That's going to be fantastic. What's one action you wish you'd taken that you haven't taken yet?
Do you know what? This has come from like the last few days. One thing that I'm gutted that I didn't do was I dismissed crypto and NFTs and all of that about a few years ago. I was like, absolute waste of my time. I can't be asked with it. And I've dug back into it in the last kind of week or 2 weeks. And what blockchain is doing in this NFT movement and these smart contracts and stuff like that is just like, it's mind blowing. Yeah. And I regret not, really kind of cementing my interest in it. Not necessarily just because of the stupid amount of money you can make on it and whatnot, but more about just understanding it from a business point of view. Because I think, we had a meeting today about it for Dose, and in the next couple of years, Dose needs to be within that, Web3 and these smart contracts and NFTs needs to be part of our product. I kick myself for not kind of carrying that on, but hindsight's beautiful, isn't it?
Well, you can't do. I always think to myself, God, I wonder what happened if I'd have bought a few Bitcoins or whatever a few years ago.
I'll tell you what would have happened. You would have sold them when it got to about 10 grand, like most people do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
to be honest,
it's very, very true. What tips have you got? Again, we shared some tips on unlocking resilience earlier, but again, about just as I said, like you are always driven by creating action, taking action when it feels tough to take action, and that's part of the resilience, right? It's like, I've never rowed a boat across the Atlantic, but I'm going to do it, and that builds resilience. We've never done an online platform like Dose, but we're going to do it, and even when it's hard, we're still going to crack on and do it, and we're going to learn. The people at the moment, again, listening to this, viewing this, hearing this, will be thinking, I wish I had a bit of that gumption. I wish I had a bit of that to drive me forward. What tips could you offer again to help people unleash that kind of resilience or that action for themselves?
I think, and I'm not just saying this, I used to be, before we did the Atlantic Row, I used to be the guy, I'd have 100 ideas, this business, that'll do great, that'll do that. And I never, ever took it forward. It was always just an idea. I had a notepad full of rubbish, but I never had the impetus to do it. And the Atlantic was the first thing in my life that I actually set this big goal and did it. And because of that, it changed everything. And I think, the one bit of advice that we give all the time, and it often comes down, we get messages after a keynote and they'll say, I'm not happy at work. I love art, but I'm so scared of leaving my job because it's, pays my mortgage and whatnot. And, it comes down to, there's nothing complicated, a pros and cons list to figure out, what is the worst case scenario of me taking this risk? And for most people, this is, this is not generic across it because people have kids and, responsibilities that some others don't. But in our sense, when we left our jobs to become full-time adventurers, which is just mental, the worst case scenario was we're going to leave our job, we try it out for 6 months, it would bomb, and then we go get another job for probably the same money or more money. Really, that was the worst case scenario. And for a lot of people, the people we speak to a lot anyway, that is the same thing. But what you would have learned in those 6 months is more than you'd learn in 10 years at your current job, like hands down. And so I think it is just being really rational and being like, actually, what is the worst thing that can happen? A lot of people think, people are going to laugh at me. I want to start a YouTube channel, but people are going to laugh at me. No one cares about you. No one cares. I always had that fear, like, oh, should I put that out on LinkedIn? Like, people, no one cares. People are busy. They're not, if someone laughs at you, who cares? Like, what a sad act. But there's so many things holding people back because of that risk. What is the worst thing that can happen? That's the question that will unlock everything for me anyway.
Brilliant. I often, it's so great to hear you say that, because again, when I'm working with clients, I was doing this recently with a bunch of my clients, and we were talking about this idea of failing fast, and everyone likes to talk about failing fast and all that sort of stuff. And the reality is it's kind of against our natural human instinct, especially as you move through a business. And so, I often talk to people about actually stop talking about fail fast, start talking about learn fast, to build a learn fast culture within your organization. And then what that enables people, it plays into their innate understanding and knowledge and desire to learn more and take more responsibility. But also it means that you just constantly feel like anything that you try, you're learning from, and your company is supporting you as an individual to learn. And if we can all do a bit more of that, if we can all do a bit more learning at work or as individuals, then what an amazing place it actually would be, and how much more resilience would we build for ourselves,
Yeah, completely. I think businesses that value, not just upskilling their staff in the sense of just putting them on courses or, buying software for them, but, taking a risk on someone who is good in this role and then putting them in a totally different role. Because, and I think this is the thing that annoys me about careers, and Helen and Sarah talk about this a lot, is, so many people spend 10 years in a career like events. I used to work in kind of brand experience, big events, big kind of experiential stuff. And, I worked in that field for 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it was. And I know somebody who works in that industry, the skills they have are remarkable. You're managing multiple stakeholders. It's super high pressure, big budgets, staying on track, profit margins, etc. Huge amount of skill set. But then when they apply to a role in a completely different industry, they don't even get an interview. Because all they're looking at is the name of the company and what that company does. That is just rubbish. Like, and that's what needs to change within organizations, but also, with organizations hiring external people. And hopefully that does change, because hiring someone on hard skills is just a way to just kill culture and productivity and performance. But we're not there yet. But I think that for me is something that I'm really passionate about trying to change with Dose, is, getting people to just be able to jump from career to career to career, and companies to learn from those people when they come in, rather than just bringing in a consultant to solve a problem. So yeah, that's something that I really think will change over the next 5, 10 years.
Brilliant. Tom, that's been fantastic. We've got some quick fire questions to wrap the show with. So here we go. What's the book that you are reading at the moment that you'd recommend that we all read?
So I've just finished Drive by Dan Pink. That was really good, about kind of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I'm rereading at the moment Sapiens, but I'm doing it via Audible, because I read that book. It took me about 9 years. It's probably the chewiest book I've ever read. Because you read a chapter, then you're like, oh my God, I don't even remember reading that. So I'm listening to it now to try, because I think I retain information more when I can hear it rather than read it. So that's what I'm reading at the moment. And I'm also reading a Tom Clancy fiction novel, because I like to read fiction as well, not just non-fiction, because it kind of numbs the brain after a while.
So I am doing exactly the same as you. I am listening to Sapiens now.
Are you really?
Yeah,
Amazing.
Not this minute, obviously, but even when I'm listening to it, you go through a chapter, it's like 4 or 5 massive concepts. You just got to stop and go, hang on a minute, hang on.
Yeah.
But I definitely recommend. It's a great one to listen to or read, but certainly brilliant, great books. In your industry, outside your industry, in life generally, who is a one to watch talent that you're keeping an eye on that we all need to be thinking about? Could it even be a musician, artist, whatever you think?
There's quite a few. Do you know who I think is really amazing, actually, who I follow on social, is a young woman called Grace Beverly. And she runs two companies. One is called Tala, one is called Shreddy, I think. Really young, like super successful. And she gives quite a good behind the scenes view of what it's like to run these two companies and how she structures it and stuff like that. I think she just wrote a book. I think she's amazing in how she operates. She's got over 1 million followers, I think. A lot of what she talks about is business, and I think the way she's doing that is great. I'd say she's the one to watch. And the other person, actually, I get asked quite a lot, who's your role model? And people laugh at me when I say this, but generally Joe Wicks, the body coach, for me, has absolutely nailed it in terms of like work-life balance, and a business where he's made tens of millions of pounds from selling PDFs is quite unbelievable. Unbelievable. So I genuinely look at him and I'm like, that is a very, very successful person, not just because of the money, but with what he's built and how he's built it. I have a huge amount of respect for.
And actually who he is now, he's a national hero, and he's, not been around for a long time in that respect, but very quickly has cemented himself as
remarkable. And he gets so much stick from PTs and shock horror. He's not even qualified. It's like, all right, mate, just because you're not a multi-millionaire and you've got a couple more qualifications, give him some stick. So he's done.
But he's a great example of resilience as well, because he started off doing that as well to sort of get more clients and everything else, wasn't it? It was like, what else can I be doing? And built that over time. It's fantastic. What's one piece of advice you were given that has stuck with you all of your life?
It's in the context of Christmas parties in the office, and that is never be the story. I think that is a solid piece of advice for anyone working, especially new people, because I have been this story before. I've done it.
Yeah, I think I have as well.
I remember someone senior at a company I worked at, and he's like, you know what, just don't be the story.
Love it.
And I think everyone's had that fear the morning after a Christmas party or something. So a great bit of advice.
Excellent. And then finally, Tom, who was your childhood hero?
Without a doubt, I was a massive Johnny Wilkinson fan. Massively into rugby when I was younger, still am, but he was kind of like a lot of kids my age, I must have been 10, 11, 12, whatever. He was definitely my idol for sure.
Fantastic. Oh, Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Certainly has.
Tonight.
It's been great fun. Thanks.
You've just given us so much food for thought. And of course, what we do, this show will be repeated and shared over our Fora channels and through our socials. I'm sure Tom will share it too when we've edited it. And also for each show that we do, we encapsulate all of the key insights that we got from Tom, and we create what's called the Boom Sheet, which you can download, which will give you all the information, all the key bits of the quotes and the great stuff that Tom's given us, that we'll also put all the links in so you can join in on Dose if you get the chance. All it leaves me to do, Tom, is say, listen, thank you so much. You've really given us an insight into, I'd like to think, just how to build resilience, what the future of resilience looks like. And indeed, we've touched on how that's going to be important for the next generation coming through in the way that they, not just their careers, because yes, it's a career focus, but how they live their lives. And, we're often thinking about that next generation. They've gone through so much over the last 80, well, they're going through so much. And if you think about what's happening in the future, climate change, everything else, they're going to go through so much. So everything that we can do to help support that next generation and help build their resilience is going to only benefit our world as it is.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, thank you so much for having me. That was great.
Absolute pleasure. Until next time, everybody, we have another wonderful guest for September, and we'll announce who she is very shortly. Again, we hope to be back in the studio for September, and we'll see you all obviously then. Until we meet again and until we see each other again, everybody out there, stay boom, and thank you very much.